Sometimes in our code we need to make decisions. Those decisions are based on conditions, and the conditions are figured out using something called Boolean logic. Let's jump into some code in Scratch and let's just explore this a little bit. In the operators section, we have an operator, for instance, greater than 50. Okay, I'm going to go over to my variables and we'll create a variable called hours. We'll create a variable called rate, and we're going to use those to illustrate some things here. I'm going to switch those both to sliders. Okay, we'll set the rate up to 15 or 14 there. Hours we'll set to 34. Okay, so if I say hours greater than 40, when I click on that, if we say 34 greater than 40, we know that's false. With logic, think of a light switch. The light switch has, a standard light switch has two positions, on or off. In Boolean logic, we have two options. It's either true or it's false. In this case, 34 greater than 40 is false. If I change this up to 45, and if I click on the block, it says 45 greater than 40 is true. Okay. Now, if we write a little bit of code around this, we can say when the space bar is pressed, then we're going to check and see if hours are greater than 40. Then we're going to say full time. So when I press this, we say full time. Okay. Another of the control structures is we can take two branches. So we can say if hours greater than 40, then we'll say full time. Else, if hours aren't greater than 40, then we will say part-time. Okay, and we'll move this block back out, bring this up, and then we'll run this. It says full-time. If I change it smaller than 40, then it says part-time. Okay. Now, we also have some additional operators to make a little more complex condition. Okay, so now normally you're full-time when you work 40 or more hours, but this just says if it's more than 40. So if we set this to 40 and run our code, it still says part-time. So what we will do is we're going to use the OR operator, and we'll say if our hours are greater than 40, and we'll pull out also the condition that says equals. So if our hours equal 40 or our hours are greater than 40, then we're full-time. So let's go ahead and put that up there. We'll run our code again, and notice now at 40 hours we're full-time. Less than 40 hours, we're still part-time. More than 40 hours, and we're full-time. Okay. Now, if we look at these conditions, we have the operators of and, or, which we already looked at, and then we also have the not operator. Okay. The way these work, the and says both sides have to be true for the condition to be true. So true and true would be a true, but true and false would be false. False and true would be false. False and false would also be false. With the or, either part has to be true, or both parts, and the whole thing is true. So true or true is true. True or false is true. False or true is true. False or false is false. The not says the opposite. So to illustrate that, if we take our hours greater than 40 right now as true, not true would be false. So if I put this block down there and say not true would be false. Okay. Now to go back and check out our and, we'll say hours greater than 40, and we'll also check to see is our rate, we'll go out and grab our rate variable, is our rate greater than $15 an hour. Okay. And again, with the and, for the whole thing to be true, both parts have to be true. So we know our hours are greater than 40, but our rate is not greater than 15. So if I run that, I get a false. Now, if our rate is more than 15, so we'll take it up to 17, now 17 is greater than 15 and 46 is greater than 40, it should now be true. Okay. So those are the different conditions we can do to make decisions in our program. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually write some real code now that we've kind of shown how to experiment around with that and figure a little bit of that out. We're going to go back to a few videos ago when we did the calc pay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and load up the calc pay project. And if you remember, we had our hours and our rate, and then we told them how much did you earn. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to throw in an overtime twist. So we're going to say if you work more than 40 hours, then you're going to get paid overtime pay for the hours over 40 that you worked. Okay. So to do that, we're going to make one more variable, and we'll call that our pay. Okay, we're going to break this off, and then what we want to do is we want to calculate our pay. So we'll say pay is, and then there's our hours times rate. And then we'll go ahead and take our pay, you earned, and your pay. So right now we haven't really changed the program yet. Okay. So if we run this, it says I worked 40 hours, and then I get $10 an hour. I still get my $400. But what this is going to let us do is make our conditional coding a little bit easier. When we calculate overtime pay, anything over the 40 hours is paid time and a half. So if you make $10 an hour, time and a half would be $15 an hour for the hours that you worked over 40. Okay, so to do that, we're going to have to decide, did I work more than 40 hours? So we'll bring out our if, then, else block. Okay, then we have to build our condition. So we're going to have to say, did I work more than 40 hours? Okay, so let's grab our variable of hours. Now, if I worked more than 40 hours, I've got some additional calculating to do. Okay, if I didn't, then my pay is just going to be the number of hours that I worked, 40 or less, times the rate. Okay. So next we have to calculate that over 40 hours. So let's go ahead and we're going to want to say pay is, and then first of all what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to calculate how much did we get paid for the first 40 hours that we worked. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll do our hourly rate, and times 40 hours. So that's our base pay. That's our first 40 hours of pay. Okay. Let's just go ahead and, to make it a little easier, we'll calculate our overtime pay. Okay. And this just a little bit smaller. We're going to now set our overtime pay to, and let's go ahead and back to our operators. And we're going to have to figure out how many hours over 40 did I work. So we'll need our hours minus 40. That's going to tell us how many hours over the 40 that we worked. And then the next thing we need to decide is what's our pay rate. Okay, so it's our rate, but then we have to multiply our rate times 1.5 because we get time and a half. 1.5. And we'll be in there when we type. Okay. And then we just need to, so here's our number of hours, and here's our adjusted rate. And then we'll just need to multiply those together. So we'll drop that in, and we'll drop this in. That's how much overtime pay we get. And then we have one more calculation to do. We need to say our pay is, and then we're going to need to add those two together. Our base pay that we calculated for the first 40 hours, and then our overtime pay. So we need our variable pay. And then we need our variable overtime. And then that'll be our final pay. So to test this out, we want to make sure when we test, we always test both branches, the if part and the else part. So let's go ahead and run this again. And the first part says if I work 40 or less hours, I'm going to get my regular pay. So we'll check that out. We'll say if I work 30 hours and I make $10 an hour, then it says I've earned $300, 30 times 10. Okay, no overtime pay, as you can see there. Now if I run it again, this time I work 50 hours. And again, to keep it simple, we'll just use the $10 per hour. Okay, so for my first 40 hours, I made $400. And then I got time and a half, so I got $15 an hour for the additional 10 hours. So that's the $150. So the 400 and the 150 gives me a pay of $550. Okay, so when you're presented with a problem that requires some decision, sit down and kind of think through what decisions do I need to make, and then just kind of piece it together like we did here. What parts, how do I calculate this part, how do I calculate that part, and test it out, try some different numbers, make sure everything works out correctly. As we mentioned before, the best way to learn to code is to try and try some more and keep trying until you figure it out. Look some things up, talk to some friends or your teacher if you have trouble or get stuck on anything. Happy coding in Scratch.